Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. We are continuing our study of the Olivet Discourse. We're focused at the present time on the promise of the coming of the Lord for the wedding, the five wise, the five foolish virgins. Now, what we have been doing is focusing on this motif of the wedding, the coming, pardon me, the coming of the Lord for the wedding. Remember that the majority of commentators look at Matthew 24 and 25 as a divided discourse. They say that, well, the apostles asked about the fall of Jerusalem, and in Matthew 24, 4 to 34, Jesus talked about the fall of Jerusalem, which included, by the way, his coming on the clouds with power and great glory. Yes, that's the amillennial and the postmillennial view. Then they tell us at Matthew 24:36, Jesus changed subjects and addressed the supposed question by the apostles who wrongly conflated the idea of Jesus' personal coming, that is to say, his literal, visible, bodily coming, and the end of the Christian age with the time of the fall of Jerusalem. So again, the premise is that the apostles were confused and that they wrongly linked the coming of the Lord and the end of the age with the fall of Jerusalem. Well, don't forget my December 2020 very, very special book offer. Watching for the Parousia, where Jesus' apostles confused, in Flaming Fire and Exegesis of 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, and We Shall Meet Him in the Air. Now, all of these books address, either explicitly or implicitly, the question of whether or not the coming of the Lord and the end of the age is rightly linked to the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. And if you were to order all three books separately, independently of each other, it would cost you over $60. For the month of December 2020, U.S. orders only, total delivered price, $42.50. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, wonderful tab right up at the top. Just click on the link, and it'll take you through it. Listen, this is a fantastic savings on wonderful material, so please take advantage of that. So what I've been doing is to show you that since it is argued by the futurists that Matthew 25, 1 to 13 is about Christ's final coming at the end of the current Christian age, what I've been sharing with you is that no, the motif, the theme, the doctrine of the coming of the Lord for the wedding is taken directly from the Tanakh, the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, and was an Old Testament promise made to Old Covenant Israel. Pardon me. Yahweh had divorced the 10 northern tribes and would divorce the 2 southern tribes, but at his coming, at his, quote, return, Hosea chapter 5, 15 and following, he would remarry the whole house of Israel. That's what's being depicted in Matthew 25, 1 to 13. And if that's the case, then Matthew 25, 1 to 13 is not about the end of time. It's not about the end of the Christian age. It is about the time of the fulfillment of God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel. The time in which all things written must be fulfilled, Luke 21 and verse 22. Meaning, that was AD 70. Meaning, the Olivet Discourse is a united discourse, cannot be divided. Now, I've been sharing with you several thoughts over several days demonstrating that Isaiah chapter 60 is an absolutely fantastic prophecy of that coming of the Lord, the restoration of Israel, the whole house of Israel, the time of the New Jerusalem, which is the time of the wedding. Now, I spent at least 3 or 4 days noticing that in Isaiah chapter 60, in this wonderful prophecy of the, quote, restoration of Israel, the restoration of the coming of the New Jerusalem, which is the time of the wedding, the Lord said in Isaiah 60 and verse 22, I, the Lord, will hasten it in its time. So when the time would come for the restoration, for the remarriage of Israel, the whole house of Israel, when the proper time would arrive for the Lord to keep his promises to Israel, the Lord said, I will hasten it in its time. Well, as I shared with you, for at least 3 or 4 days, the word time there is Kairos. And I shared with you for 4 days the New Testament passages. I gave you just a taste of the number of times the word is used. It's used some 82 times. And over and over and over in the New Testament writers tell us that the time foretold, the appointed time foretold by the prophets had come. Mark 1:15. 1 Peter chapter 4, 5 to 17. Revelation 1 to 3. Now, listen to me, folks. What this means, undeniably, irrefutably, since the Lord said, when the time comes, the Lord will hasten fulfillment. I want you to notice 2 things very quickly. In Isaiah chapter 66, the Lord foretold, once again, the New Jerusalem, the new creation, which is the time of the wedding, according to Revelation 21. Behold, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and I saw a new Jerusalem descending from God out of heaven. That's Isaiah 66. And the Lord said, will I bring to the time of birth and not bring forth? You see, this is directly parallel to Isaiah 60:22, when the Lord said, well, when the time comes, I will hasten it. Now the Lord is saying, when the time of the birth comes, will I not bring forth? By the way, both of these passages are a complete refutation of the dispensational doctrine of the postponement of the kingdom. Thomas Ice said in the book, End Times Controversy, that as a result of the rebellion of the Jews in the first century, the rejection of the kingdom offer, that unbelief made it, quote, impossible, unquote, for God to fulfill those promises. As a result, the kingdom offer was withdrawn. The kingdom offer was postponed. God established the kingdom, God established the church instead. No. The Lord said in Isaiah 60, when the time comes, I will hasten, not postpone, I will hasten its fulfillment. And Isaiah 66 said, when the time arrives for the birth, I will not fail to bring forth. See, that's God's promise. When you consider the fact that the Old Testament predicted the rejection of Jesus, that means that the rejection of Jesus, the unbelief of the Jews, the rejection of the kingdom offer did not take God by surprise. It could not have caused God to postpone the kingdom. I mean, after all, if the Lord himself predicted the rejection of Jesus, then he knew it was coming, And he planned for its reality, and he said, guess what? When the time comes, I'm going to hasten fulfillment. And when the time of the birth arrives, I'm going to bring forth. Now, I want you to notice secondly and finally this morning, in regard to this promise of the Lord, that when the time came, when that appointed time for the fulfillment of the new heaven and new earth, the new Jerusalem, the remarriage, the restoration of Israel, when the time arrived, the Lord would hasten fulfillment and would not fail to bring forth. Over in 2 Peter chapter 3, Peter addresses his audience, and he speaks of, according to his promise, we look for a new heaven and a new earth. Well, Isaiah 66, look for a new heaven and a new earth, just like Isaiah 65, just like Isaiah 60, just like Isaiah 62. According to his promise, we look for a new heaven and a new earth wherein dwells righteousness. And Peter went ahead to say, we, according to his promise, look for the new heaven and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. Therefore, beloved, looking forward. Now, the word looking there is a very strong word indicating urgent, expectant looking. Looking forward to these things, be diligent to be found in him without spot and without blemish. And now notice, in verse 12, after saying they were looking, once again that strong word of urgency, expectant, imminence, he says looking for and hastening the coming of the Lord. The coming of the Lord for what? For the new creation. Looking for the wedding. And he said, in that time in which they were living, they were hastening the coming of the Lord. They could only hasten it if the Lord was hastening it in fulfillment of Isaiah 60:22. And so what we have in Isaiah 60, conflating it and harmonizing it with all of these New Testament prophecies about the time of the wedding, about the time of the new creation, is that God said when the time for fulfillment arrived, he would hasten its fulfillment. Here is Peter in 2 Peter 3, looking for the very things foretold by Isaiah chapter 60, and he said it was hastening the day. They were hastening the day. Well, again, let me reiterate. They couldn't hasten the day unless the Lord was hastening the day. And that means the fulfillment of 2 Peter chapter 3. The new heaven and new earth. The new Jerusalem. The time of the wedding of Matthew 25 was truly at hand. And that means it was fulfilled shortly, quickly, soon. Just like Peter said in 1 Peter chapter 4. The end of all things has drawn near. The appointed time, the Kairos of Isaiah 60:22. The appointed time for the judgment has come. They, not us, they were living in the time of the coming of the Lord for the wedding of Matthew 25. Okay, you got homework for tomorrow. Your homework for tomorrow, read Isaiah 62. Folks, if you want absolute definitive proof that the wedding of Matthew 25, 1 to 13, was to be in AD 70 is found in Isaiah 62. I'll see you on the flip side.